been sitting on my kitchen counter since last night.
Hello everyone, it's 11 o'clock. Welcome, Park Street Christian Church. Let the fun begin. Chatty Ken and Kathy, take a seat. I can say that. I've been called that. Good morning.
Good morning.
Lovely.
Good morning.
So here we are. We're in week 3 of this summer speaker series, and summer when the living is easy and pews tend to empty, we gather around in these tables, and kind of a coffee house style, so that we can break bread together, share a little bit about ourselves with our companions as we break bread together. And also learn a bit. Our primary focus of our speaker series this summer is to invite those within our own fellowship. Last week we had a fantastic, I'm not going to say outsider, but someone who doesn't attend here, Erin McLeod, who was just brilliant, and Addison, thank you for an incredible interview and introducing us to her. She was just amazing. Songwriting skills for, and the voice to back it, which doesn't always happen. Ask Leonard Cohen. So, here we are. We're gonna be featuring one of our very own again this week, and that is Heidi, better known as Sam and Maggie's mom. But to those who don't have her always carrying her squad together, she's known as Dr. Heidi Nobles, and we're gonna learn more about that. I know. She's a cardiologist. Paul Titus loves to use doctor of law, that he, like, I am the only doctor in the house, so like, stay away from the scalpel. Good at that. I'm going to start with some comments, some scripture, and as I do each week, and welcome you here. The scripture I wanted to read is quite a short one. It's not as short as "and he wept," but be still and know that I am God. For you regulars, you have become familiar with the author and blessing writer Kate Bowler, whose book was featured in June, Have a Beautiful, Terrible Day. The following are her thoughts and a blessing entitled, A Blessing for a Good Pause. A reminder that we all need to break out of the busyness, the chaos, or the status quo, the way things just always go, every once in a while, to wake up to the now. This speaker series, Sacred Daring, was just that when we tested this format last year, and we found it to be worth a dare this year as well, and hopefully in years to come. Bowler's words seemed fitting for a week in which we feature our friend Heidi, a lover of the written word. But now, a word from Kate and then a blessing. Emily Dickinson, the 19th century poet of solitude, knew the beauty of stillness. She described that moment of pause as the deepest kind of privacy when a soul is admitted into its own company. I'd like to call that sacred company. It feels like finite infinity, she concluded. For most of us, that kind of quiet feels elusive to us. We ache to know our soul's calm, but also, isn't there something on Netflix that I need to watch? Yeah. Wait, let me check my text first. Before we know it, we are swimming around in a sea of notifications and updates without direction, without attention, really. We give it away without knowing the cost. I mean, who can blame us, she continues. We are living in an attention economy where the first casualty is peace, peace, peace. So let's bless our distracted selves. If we can't bring ourselves to desire stillness, maybe we can talk ourselves into wanting a little less noise. Let us mindfully consider this now as I read Bowler's blessing. This is the moment. I can feel it. It is the microsecond pause before the habitual override that sends me into motion again, barreling ahead. Instead of paying attention to what my body is trying to tell me about its limitations, to what pulls on my mind, To your Spirit's wisdom, God, so hard won. I'm here now, in the blessed in-between, the transition phase that isn't anything yet. It's a pivot point that would be a shame to waste again with mindless scrolling or what is happening in the news. Right. Stop. Stay. This is the sacred space of the nothing yet, a place where I can become aware that you are pulling at me, tugging at me. Be present with me here, O calmer of chaos. In these whirring seconds at the tiny crossroads that is this moment, slowing me long enough to wonder, is that you tapping me on the shoulder? All right, I'm listening. Amen.
I often say to the little kids in preschool, do you all have your listening ears on? So that's what we need to have this morning when it comes to hearing the Lord and being in the moment to hear him in stillness. We're going to start with a song we've been singing every week, and I don't know how much I need to go over it. It's breathe in, breathe out. It's in 3 parts. I'm just going to start it, and you can join in when you feel comfortable. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. Everyone keep singing that. Breathe out. 2. When I breathe in, I breathe peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Keep going. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love.
I have 2 more sacred readings to share. The first from Mother Teresa. A sacrifice, to be real, must cost, must hurt, and we must empty ourselves. Give yourself fully to God. God will use you to accomplish great things on the condition that you believe much more in God's love than in your weakness. Somewhat apropos for our discussion earlier this morning. From the Greek scriptures as translated in Priests for Equality, the Inclusive Bible, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. Paul's response to living under the veiled law of Moses versus God's law of love. But whenever anyone turns to our God, the veil is removed. Now our God is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of our God is, there is freedom. And we, who with unveiled faces reflect our God's glory, grow brighter and brighter as we are being transformed into the image we reflect. This is the work of our God through his Spirit. Then we'll have a special musical from Paul.
Heidi requested this song, and it's possible this may be the first time this song has ever been sung in any church anywhere. So you are witnessing perhaps history in the making. Now, if you do know of a church where this has been performed, please text, email, or call me, and I will amend my conclusion that this is the first time. Dear Dear sir or madam, will you read my book? It took me years to write. Will you take a look? It's based on the story of a man named Lear. I need a job and I want to be a paperback writer. Paperback writer. It's a classic story of a desperate man. His lovely wife doesn't understand. The son is working for the Daily Mail. It's a steady job, but we all want to be paperback writers. Paperback writers. Everybody now. Paperback writers. Paperback writers. It's 300 pages, give or take a few. I'll be writing more in a week or two. I can change it round if you like the style, but I need a job and I want to be a paperback writer. Paperback writer, everybody. Paperback writer, paperback writer. If you really like it, you can have the rights. You can make $1 million for you overnight. But if you must return it, you can send it here. But I need a break, and I want to be a paperback writer. Paperback writer. Everybody, keep going, y'all singing. Paperback writer. Paperback writer. Let's do it again. Paperback writer. Paperback writer. One more time, I'm looking around. You gotta all be singing. I'll just go all day long. Paperback writer. Paperback writer.
So when is there going to be a Derringer Discoveries podcast featuring Paul Johnson? You have written a whole lot of songs, performed it, and you always put your fingerprints on it. That's what we love the most. So here we are. I'm going to do a brief introduction of the person who's going to be interviewing Heidi, and that is someone who hides. She loves being the center of attention. I can just tell you this. But what's really bad, if you ever have lunch with me, I have a mug that Donna gave me. Says, "Be careful what you say; it might end up in a sermon." And I would also you have to be careful to say, "Oh, I wouldn't mind helping with that." And Catherine Higginbotham has really made some mistakes. She has lunch with me a lot, and this past Tuesday, I said, I was going to ask you to interview Heidi, and you're going to hear why in a minute. And she goes, and I said, but I know you don't really like to be up there unless you're juggling cats. And she said, I would have interviewed Heidi. Lo and behold, Ruth Thornton got COVID. And I got a call on Tuesday night. And I contacted Miss Catherine Higginbotham, who is joining me now with her guest, who she's going to interview, and said, hey, I'll do it. And here she is. Now you just take a good look because she's normally hiding in the back. And now everybody knows your name, they know what you look like, and you'll never get away.
Her wife was going to say, that is falling in the face.
Hi Heidi. How are you? Hello. I'm good. How are you? I'm good. So I just wanted to start by quickly saying how I met Heidi. So Heidi was one of the first people I met at Park Street through Ray, who said, my wife works in the English department. I was a grad student in the English department at the time. Would you like to meet her? And I said, yes, I would. And we bonded over our mutual affection for my thesis advisor, David Vandermeulen, who's wonderful. And I have this, and the Wind in the Willows, which was the topic for my master's thesis. And I have to say that there's something uniquely intimidating about going to a church where you don't know anybody for the first time, and there's something uniquely intimidating about starting grad school or apartment where you don't know anybody. And Heidi made me feel welcome in both those spaces. So thank you, Heidi, for doing that. So Heidi, I want to ask questions about how you grew up, how you got into your career. But first, I was wondering if you could give us a teaser of the project that's mentioned in your bio on the tables.
Yes. So I'm very excited about my project. Record.com, which is a very small, unpopulated, very little website right now, but I got a grant from the Jefferson Trust and the UVA libraries to publish a book so that we could document the process of publishing a book. Because usually what we do in editing is proprietary, it happens behind closed doors, it's hidden under contracts, people don't see the drafts, and so it's all, we think these books just appear and they're done, and in fact they took years of lots of interventions from lots of people. So we're documenting that and making it public for authors, for other editors, for people who are in classes, and also we're publishing the book at the end of the process.
Which is super exciting, and I can't wait to hear more about it. But first, to go back in time, can you tell us a little bit about where and how you grew up? It sounds like you moved around quite a lot.
Yes, so I was a military kid. I moved 22 times before we got to Charlottesville, mostly the eastern half of the United States, and then our cool tour was Germany. But yeah, moving got into my blood pretty early. The first couple were rough, and then I was like, oh, this is fun, and then it was kind of difficult to stop. But I'm here now.
So all of those changes growing up, and you said that it was fun in a lot of ways. So some of it, you enjoyed, but what helped you cope, particularly early on when it was still stressful?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is Colleen's leading way of getting us to books, but yeah, totally the books. So I was a reader early. Our first move was when I was 6, so I had my books with me, and then I just always had some in my bag wherever we went, and I had a lot of, growing up in cars, we usually moved mid-year, and we would take, Dad always had like 30 or 60 days of leave saved up, so whenever we moved, we did this long, ridiculous road trip, and so I just sat and grew up in the backseat of cars, and read a ton, and my mom was compulsively early for everything, so we had to be at places at least 2 hours early just in case, so I always had books with me, and I was a shy kid. It took me usually like a year before I would feel comfortable with my classmates, and by then it was time to go again, so I usually had a friend like right before we were about to leave, and then I didn't fix that until grad school.
And what do you remember about your experiences reading and writing as a child? I mean, it was, part of the fabric of your life, but what about it became influential for you?
Well, so Ruth had done like this kind of pre-interview, and the story that I think thought was the most appropriate was when I was 6 or 7. We were in New York, and I took all my books off my shelf. My dad loves to tell this story. He found me in my room. All the books are all over the room, and I had my index cards in a little like recipe box, and I was making a card catalog. I liked categorizing them early and figuring out how they fit together, and rereading things and rereading them in different combinations, and rereading the same book from different characters' perspectives, and trying to figure out how they function. And then I don't know. I was probably in grad school before I realized that a lot of my memories. I don't think this is uncommon actually, but I didn't figure out that a lot of my memories were more from the books than from my own childhood. Which I had done some of that like on purpose. When we were moving so much that Mom just like gave up on regular school, which I totally get because it was again always the mid-year. It was such a hassle, and the curriculum was always overlapping, and so she just started homeschooling us, and I was homeschooled from I guess the end of 6th grade through high school. And back then you could take classes at the local public schools, even if you weren't full-time enrolled, so I usually was enrolled in a class, and I would get to go, like I went to my prom, I did all of the like normal kid stuff, and most people didn't know I wasn't really there. But I also missed out on a lot of normal things, and so I would watch movies retrospectively and like, oh, 16 candles. I was like, okay, that's what I was supposed to experience. Imagine. So some of it was on purpose, where I would go back, but a lot of it, like A Wrinkle in Time, growing up with Meg Murray, growing up with like all these other characters that just became part of my, like, these were my friends, right? I'm like, oh, that's a little weird, huh? but that is how I perform myself.
Yeah, and I love your story about the card catalog too, because I think everybody who ends up in grad school has a moment they can look back on and say, oh yeah, that was inevitable. So, this was always going to happen. And so then what about your getting into your academic career in your young adult life? How did you decide to go to grad school, and what came after that?
I do think the growing up military and just like having to, I think I'm a naturally fairly type A person, and I like to have everything organized, and but I couldn't control my world, so I learned to be intentionally flexible, I guess, and I built like structures for myself. Like, okay, as long as I have these things, I can just go with the flow and do whatever needs to happen around me. So I took that approach into adulthood. So I went to college. I didn't know what was going on. I graduated from high school really young, and my parents sent me to Oklahoma Christian University because my sister had a friend who went there and they thought I'd be safe. We lived in DC at the time, so they drove me to Oklahoma, dropped me off, and I just turned 17, and I called them a week later. I was like, what is this place? But I stayed, and I actually, there was a little honors program that was there that was just wonderful and really changed my life for the better. And then I changed my major every single semester. I walked into the registrar's office my senior year. I was like, so this is what I've done. My friends are graduating. I think I probably should too. Is there anything I can do? And they said, you can have a liberal studies degree. And I said, thank you very much. And then after that, I went and studied economics for 6 months because I hadn't had very much math in college, and I felt like that was a gap. And I was going to get a master's in economics, but the econ people were really boring. So I stopped that, and I dropped out, and I moved home and was working at a coffee shop, and I called my undergraduate mentor, and I said, this is where I am, what should I do with my life? And I thought he would tell me, oh, I can't tell you that. And he said, oh, I'm so glad you called. I wondered what you were doing. You need to go get a graduate degree in English. And I said, okay. So it just kind of went on like that. I went and got an MA in literature. It was supposed to be a PhD, but that, I decided I wasn't into it, and I went and got a real job, and that was how I got into publishing. So I interned during my MA at the University Press and said, oh, this is the first like real job I can stand. I like this. Okay. So I went and got that, and then after a couple of years in a real job, I was like, oh, I miss school. So I went back and got an MFA in creative nonfiction, but at that point I was always doing like both at the same time. So I was either in school or like in academia full time and editing on the side, or I was in publishing full time and then like adjuncting or something on the side. And there's a little circuitous thing that does involve a stint in the military, but it was very short lived because again I was like, no. But I did go to boot camp. And when I was leaving boot camp, and my flight mates were saying, you're not supposed to leave boot camp, right? And they were running with me, trying to talk me out of it because they're supposed to. And they said, well, what are you going to do? I was like, oh, I'm going to go get a PhD in English. So I did. And now I'm here. So
just casually get a PhD in English, as one does.
There's other like sidebars there, yeah, obviously.
So you had this career in publishing in industry, and then you also have this academic career, kind of simultaneously. And reading about Road Trip Press, reading about your project, it strikes me that in many ways it's kind of marrying those two interests. There's clearly your love of academia and your career in academia, and then there's also this this element from your life working in publishing. And I'm wondering how that came about, and also how long has it been in the making? How long has this been in your head before it kind of came to be?
Oh, that's a good question. So officially, just a couple of years, but I did, now you're asking, so I pitched my first publishing company 20 years ago, probably. And I was working in Nashville for a publishing company, and I was annoyed that they weren't doing things right, you know. so I went to another publishing company in town and pitched a new like subdivision, and they were really interested, but it was supposed to come with me and one of my colleagues, and then she chickened out, and so we didn't do it. I'm still kind of mad at her for that, but it's just as well. I don't know if this is or not, but I'm going to sidebar just for a second to say, like, what I've discovered is when I say the word editing, we're all talking about different things, we're all thinking about different things, and I usually talk to academic audiences about this, so I'm sorry, I'll try to not make it obnoxious. But for me, editing is like, so there's copy editing, right, it's fixing the sentences, but I don't tend to, I mean, I'm not a very good copy, I'm okay, I just don't care that much. If you want to have bad, like, I'll fix it, whatever. But I think more about the acquisitions part, so like the author writing in saying, please take my book, and I have worked on the acquisition side of it and been the one to get all those pitch proposals, and try to decide which books we are and aren't going to publish, and then working with those authors. Stage, which is when we're like working with authors who don't necessarily even have anything written, they do have is like in part, and then we're trying to work with them to help them get their ideas out and get a manuscript. And then after that, you have substantive editing, which is, okay, there's a whole manuscript, but it is a hot mess. Let's like rearrange this thing and make it into a proof. And then there's all these other editorial divisions. So I think of publishing, and it's very like fast-paced and exciting. And the Nashville company that I was so frustrated with, which was actually a New York company, I was in the Nashville branch, and that was sweet. I got all the New York publishing, but at the time, Nashville prices were so much better. They, wait for it, I lost it, but I'm coming back. Well, that didn't help. I always describe as like the Devil Wears Prada, but with books. There was a lot of drama, and there was a lot of like, unseemly stuff, but it was so fun. And they were professionals, and they were so good at what they were doing. It was just fast-paced, and like all of the stuff that the paperback writers trying to get into, and like all of the conferences and going and yes, having like these pitch sessions with would-be authors and talking to other editors and the wheeling and dealing and the launch parties and all the things. Sorry, so just for some context of what is going on.
No, and I think that context is really helpful in terms of outlining what you're doing with the project, because I think it was just to see the proofs and then the edits on top of it, but that's not all that's being seen from Roadtrip Press. It's not just the proofs and the edits, it's going back all the way to the conception of the book. It's a more holistic journey through it.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, one reason I was kind of excited about this is that I think a lot about like the spirituality of editing, but I've never talked about it before. So this is helping me put some things into words that I've never thought or been able to say to other people before. So that was my first one. Like, oh yeah, that's one of those. So yeah, because you can't predict what's going to happen, right? And it's so embarrassing. but that's so good for us. So in a big fancy commercial house, I mean, this is one of the reasons I wanted to do the project. They're so, it's so impossible to get acquired at this point. And one of my agent friends who was the senior editor when I was an editorial assistant, and she comes in as a guest speaker to one of my classes every year. And she said at this, like, when I was in, again, like Hachette, the big company, it was all about author platform. You had to acquire somebody who had, you know, a TV show or a radio broadcast or whatever. They had to have a following already that you could tap into for marketing. But that seems to have gone out of control. And she said at this point, she, as the agent, can't even acquire anybody if they don't have at least 100,000 followers on Instagram. And so these people, like, they're not writers necessarily, right? They have a platform that you can sell stuff to. And so I wanted to say, wait a second, and so then she's not editing the books, because by the time she acquires them, they've already been through a whole process before she gets them. They have to basically be press ready, and then she sells them, because she works on commission, so she doesn't have time to work with the authors on development. And the publishers aren't investing in editing books anymore. The editors are given all these project management things to do. If they want to edit a book, they have to do it on evenings and weekends. So they might pick 1 or 2 a season out of 15 that they're going to actually edit. I'm very frustrated. So I wanted to say, wait a minute. I had the opportunity. I was really good editorial training, and I realized that most people didn't. And it was kind of a fluke. So when I worked for Baylor University Press, the press director thought I was going to be cooler than I was. So he took me under his wing and taught me a bunch of stuff, and then I think was disappointed. He got the next one though. She was great. But I learned a ton. And then I went to Hachette, and the Nashville division, we didn't have as much of the hazing hierarchy, I think, as they did in the New York offices. And so where one of my counterparts wasn't even allowed to go into some of the editorial meetings when she was being trained. She wasn't allowed to sit. It took a year. Her thing was, oh yeah, after a year you're allowed to go to the meetings, but you're not allowed to. You don't get a name and you can't sit down. You stand at the wall. And after a year you're allowed to sit down, but you don't get a name. Or it was 3 years before you were allowed to actually. But I was first day they had me, in there, and I still they weren't impressed with what I had to say, but that's okay. I learned. And then they had me shadow edit all these people, and so I was shadow editing with the fiction editors and the nonfiction editors, and with non specializations and with the fiction. They also have different specializations, all these different subgenre training that is mostly invisible, and so I wanted to make it visible through the project.
And the culture you're describing, I mean, honestly, it doesn't sound like it's necessarily compatible with spirituality, and yet I also hear your frustration with a lot of it. And so I'm curious where that intersection happens for you. In a culture that maybe isn't welcoming to it, where did you find that passion, inspiration, and spirituality?
I could go lots of directions with that. I don't know. No one cares. Why did you say that? Yeah, we can come back. But I have a list of just spiritual, not very interesting either. Well, so for instance, with that, if I'm in commercially a big reputable house, I acquire books that I think are going to look good, and they look good on my list, and that's part of how I can promote it. And all of this is, but it's very polished. And the project is so messy. And we acquired this book that it's a mess. My students, because I'm teaching an editing class right now, so they're reading part of the current draft, and they said tentatively, they're like, so is this normal? Yeah. If you're editing, this is normal. I don't remember, I said, but I realized that I hit my panic point with this one about 3 months ago, but I don't think I've ever had a book where I didn't hit a panic point of just oh, I think we should break up. And the author did too, right? And she's emailing me. She's like, if you want to kill the project. And we actually met up in New York last month. We both happened to be there, and we got together in Central Park with our kids. And I said, do you want to kill the project? And she said, no. I said, okay, I don't either. So now let's work through the stages. But I have no idea what it's going to look like to other people. I don't know, when I think about the faculty in the English department, we have very, prestigious faculty in the English department, and they see that I have chosen this book, and I have worked on it for a year or two, and this is what happened, and they might think I'm an idiot, I don't know. And I think that's, I don't know, that seems spiritual to me, right? The ability to not have everything be perfect, and the willingness to, being forced to take risks, even when it's incredibly uncomfortable, and not only associating with the people who are superficially perfect, but who we're real people. We're working through these things together. And then on that note, I guess, so we're almost done with developmental edit. We were supposed to be done 3 or 4 months ago, but these things happen. So, and the author, I don't know, just I love developmental edit because you get all of people's insecurities, and you spend all this time saying no, what you're saying is valuable, and trying to get them to expand, and then you can cut it back later. And even, I guess now that the manuscript is almost complete, I've got the printout, and I'm making more detailed notes than I normally would. And I found myself yesterday making so many line edits saying, you're apologizing too much, which I find myself doing with a lot of authors. Just like, you don't have, like, we'll put the justification in the prologue, but then, like, this is a legitimate project and you're doing legitimate work. And it's so, like, I don't know. I had one author probably 10 years ago or so. I'm not super proud of all of the books that I've worked on, I will say. But this one, I really liked her, and she had been, she was in Church of Christ, so cousin of disciples, minister, and, you know, in the Church of Christ, women are not supposed to do this, right? And so it started out with, the book was supposed to be about her ministry, and the first draft of the manuscript and the second draft of the manuscript were so apologetic, like capital A apologetic, of like explaining why she should be allowed to do this, and you know, why she felt called, and why that, you know, she wasn't trying to be heretical, and she was trying to do all of these things. She's like, no, stop, like, you're fine. That's why we acquired the book. And so it ended up, she had a little apology, I guess, section at the beginning, but then she was actually able to talk about her ministry and all this work that she was doing that was incredibly valuable. And I think that was, I don't know, I watched, this is me speculating because I didn't ask her about it, but watching how she was presenting herself before, and then after the book came out, the confidence level that went up for her, and her own sense of, yeah, I don't have to apologize for this all the time. It's great.
I think we're about at time, but what I have to say is that I think what I find so moving about this project, I mean, academically I'm really excited about it. What I find spiritually moving about it is that you're making a process that's so sleek and black box become really vulnerable, as a way, in many ways, of highlighting how editing, you know, makes an extremely vulnerable experience for the author more confident, and helps to actualize their idea. And I think opening that up is really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
All right. Well, thanks, Heidi. In my world, where I put things in these little boxes, really never thought of editing as being, you know, I think of editing as where I should put a comma. And I really have no idea where to put commas, so I just put them wherever I think they're supposed to go. And Corey has issue with that. Anyhow, but thanks, Heidi, for giving to us today. We're all gathered in this place, but especially Heidi, kind of superhuman, it seems. In a few moments, we will share time with one another around the welcome table, a place where we will not only break bread and pen our inquiries, but take a moment or two to chat with your companions. David, come around with the offering place to gather not only your gifts, but also your questions for Heidi. With that, will you join me in a moment of reflection as we consider the Spirit's gifts to us and our gifts to others? Will you pray with me? The one who raises the sun each morning and lifts high the noon and night, ushers us through the cycle of rising, falling, and rising again. Though we stumble, God lifts us. Though we doubt, God remains. Though we get weary, God receives and revives. To each of us, God gives. Amen.
Thank you. And it's true. As I shared before, most of them struggling with learning disabilities, it was always a real fun task. And then be married to someone who is great at what he does and needs to just keep doing what he does. He'll hand me letters. I'm going to write this letter to the appellate court. Could you proof it? And it's first of all, what is it that you're actually trying to say? Because these commas and these run-on sentences are killing me. Which you would imagine as a person that chases squirrels for a living, besides pastoring, that run-on sentence is just a way of life, but not on paper. So we do come to this time, and I thank you for, I lost time. If I didn't have a little dinger going off with the pink cards, never would have shown up. So thank you both, Catherine and Heidi, for that time of sharing. You know, we don't really know each other. I mean, we think we do. I mean, I do the Welshers. When you struggle with kind of an ADHD impairment, that was war phones. You know, an airplane would go over, and you might be find a place at a table. We have some space here so that we can break this bread. And you don't have to be completely vulnerable to do that, but this is an opportunity to not only share your story, but to listen, Colleen. Listen, Colleen, the story of others. Making room for God's Spirit and recognizing that all. And of the entourage, the highly noble entourage, and please, we love the little teeny tiny voice, who she's named after. Will you share?
Maggie? Mm-hmm. So she's got so many names. I love to overname children. So Margaret is Meg Murray from
Meg Murray from
and then
Clinton.
Bailey is her she's Margaret Bailey, head of Knowles. Nice. Bailey is her godfather, Grant Bailey, head of his Gray.
She's so important. She has so many names. We can't wait to watch this one. If she follows even remote out world with the element. So as I explained last week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them to follow me in my motions, break the bread, and then we're going to go to the chalice, and then move to the elements. Are we ready? Have we found it? Great, have a seat. This is beautiful. Okay, so we remember, and I'm sure that as tidy as Paul put it in that I'm sure that Jesus probably had to say, boys, I have something. Girls, because I'm sure there were some women in that room. I have something to say. So, taking a tradition and giving it, and erase the bread. He broke the bread. Blessing. Take this bread of life and remember me. We call it chalice. This is living water. Take and drink and remember me. Amen.
I think you call that money.